stay tuned. We're going live right now. Okay. 1 second here. Let's try this again. Oh, looks like we're good. I guess we're live. Okay. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to UIC Limited TV. My name is Joseph Patterson, and tonight we're going to be talking about how to escape inflation. Hope you like the topic. It's a very interesting one, maybe a little dull for some people. It depends on how much you want to, know and understand finance. So I'm going to be looking on this screen, which is YouTube, and I'm also going to be looking over here on TikTok from time to time as we go through this topic. Hello, Juliet. Good to see you on as well. All right, so let's dive into the topic now and get our feet wet right away. So first of all, our goal tonight is to understand how to escape inflation. And you might think it's very difficult to do so. And to be honest with you, it is difficult as well as it is not so difficult. It is a major challenge because inflation affects every single area of your life. It affects the price of housing. It affects the price of food. It affects the price of gasoline. It affects the price of education. It affects your savings. It affects your retirement. So inflation is not something to be joked with. But here's the sad part about it. Most people do not understand the cause of inflation. They might even hear a definition like, too much money chasing too few goods. What does that really mean? Yeah. So you hear that kind of statement and you're like, what does that really mean? How do I apply that to my daily understanding of life? How do I use that to make decisions on a day-to-day basis? And so in this episode, I want to really help you to fully understand inflation and how to escape it in your daily lives. Yeah. So to understand inflation, you first need to understand the difference between what we call money and what we call currencies. There are two different things. In my previous presentation, I talked about money and currency. Tonight, I'll say a little bit more on that for your understanding of the subject. So money, first of all, as I explained before in a previous session, money is a generally accepted medium of exchange, meaning most of us accept it as a medium of exchange, right? It is also portable, it is durable, it is fungible, it is easily divisible, but most importantly, money is a reliable store of value. Example, gold and silver. So a key component of money is that it stores its value. Now, currency is like money in every way, except that currency is not a good store of economic value. Currency is based on a monetary system that is designed to cause it to lose its value if you do not constantly put it into circulation, constantly invest it. So if you're an ordinary person, if you're a regular day-to-day person who just goes to work and earn a living and come home, you're in serious trouble because you can't save in a very constructive manner. Because if you just save your money, you're going to be losing it very fast, right? Because currency is not money and it is always losing its value. So if you're an ordinary person, how are you going to survive in an economy where the monetary system is designed to fail you? It is designed to constantly reduce in value unless you have the skills and competencies to aggressively invest it, to turn it over, so that if you earn $1, you're constantly earning more than inflation to keep that $1 and hopefully earn more than that to grow that $1, right? So if you're an ordinary citizen who don't understand money, and even if you do, but you don't know how to turn that money over fast enough to outpace inflation, it's like you're running, but you're slipping backwards. You're always falling behind. You're always kind of drifting backwards. Yeah? And you might even work very hard. And yes, momentarily you get ahead. So sometimes you make enough money to buy better things than other people. You make enough money to buy a house that's nicer than maybe your peers or a nicer car. But you're always on edge because you can't stop, you can't pause. You have to keep running faster and faster. So when money or when currency is used and it doesn't retain its value, what's happening is that it's taking away more of your time and more of your energy. Now, if you think about it carefully, slavery was just like that. When you were a slave, when we were slaves before our foreparents, somebody was stealing your time and your energy. So they put you on a plantation and they whip you to work for them. And they work you very hard and you get very little for it. And they were stealing your time and your energy. Now, inflation does the same thing. It steals your time and your energy because you can't just work and put your value into money and then hold that money and that money holds your value. You have to do something to get that money to work for you. And the weaker you are at doing that is the poorer you will be. Yes, of course, sometimes you will get ahead because you have a good career. You know, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, you're an engineer. And so your salary level is higher than most people. So you're in the so-called middle class and you feel good about that. And that's fine. But the fact is, you cannot just take that money you have earned and put it aside for later years. Because in the later years, that money will be worth less and less and less and less and less and less. So something is seriously wrong with that picture. And I submit to you that it is a trick. It is a trap. It's designed to be that way. And so tonight I want to share with you ways in which you can overcome that system. So remember, currency is based on a monetary system designed to lose its value if you do not constantly invest that money for it to continue to exceed inflation. That is why it's called currency. You know, it's like a current in a line. Yeah. As long as electrons are flowing, you have current. If not, you don't have any current anymore. So the reason you must constantly invest, and I'm addressing my friends here on TikTok as well as my friends here on YouTube. So I'm looking from side to side. The reason you must constantly invest currency is because of the artificial inflation created by a system called central banking. And I will explain this system shortly. But that is the main reason why you have artificial inflation. The central banking system is where the global elites get the governments of the world to validate or legalize their reps as a central authority over the nation's money supply, over the nation's interest rate, and over the nation's exchange rate. Now, this is amazing, eh? Because it means that your government, the Jamaican government, is actually colluding with others to rob you, the citizens. Think about it carefully. If there are a set of banking cartels who are able to organize and set up a banking system that systematically robs you of your time and energy by way of a system called inflation, then it means that your government is engaged in fraud. Now, of course, they ensure that you don't understand money, economics, inflation in a way that you become incensed and angry. They make sure that you're always unsure as to what this really means. What's really going on here? And the media helps you to stay that way. Your education system helps you to stay that way. So you're not too sure what to make of inflation. In fact, today, most people think that inflation is normal. It's a normal thing. This just happened. We just, have to live with it. But it's not normal. It's actually designed. And the way it is designed is that they set up what is called a central banking system so that you do not have a free market of money. What you have is a centralized governed system, much like communism. So it's like, in communism, you have a central dictator. And that's the same thing with banking. You have a centralized banking system, which is operated by people behind the scenes. As a matter of fact, many of the people who are working within the banking sector themselves don't necessarily understand this. They're just an employee following instructions. Like when you get a new job, you just kind of follow the rules, whatever the rules are. They set up a process and procedure and say you do this. People just follow the rules. But this central banking system is like communism that centrally plans and manages the nation's money supply and interest rate on behalf of global oligarchs. In Jamaica, we have the PSOJ oligarchs. These are the rich elites in the country that kind of run things by virtue of controlling our government by funding the campaigns. Above that, you have the bigger elites, global oligarchs. They work behind the scenes and they kind of direct the show, what's going to happen. And countries are forced through various mechanisms to conform to these systems. So the central bank system is really a oligarchy system that is running like a banking cartel globally to direct and control the monies of the countries around the world. So practically every country uses what is called a fiat monetary system, which is a fake system. It means that the money is not backed by productivity. It is just backed by the government saying, this is money, use it. And if you don't use it, we're going to lock you up. I mean, it's the only legal tender in the country. And if you don't follow this, you're breaking the law. So it's government by fiat. It's money by fiat. Yeah. So the government makes legislations that makes these central banks the authority in our countries. And then the government follows the rules set by these central bank or global oligarchs and implement that upon the people. So in Jamaica, we don't have an independent central bank. What we have is a central bank which is controlled by outsiders, but is called the Jamaica Central Bank. Now, follow me closely. Now, the global elites working through the central banks of the world are then able to manipulate every single country and the world economy to create booms and busts as they see fit in order to benefit a few at the expense of the unsuspecting majority. So, for example, they can cause the stock market to go up by just reducing interest rates significantly, and then cause people to pump into the stock markets, and then they can just raise interest rates sharply when they're ready and cause the markets to flop. They can direct banks to give more loans to the housing market and inflate the housing market, and then they can just simply pull the plug and push up mortgage interest rates and then flop the market, and of course cause a lot of upheavals in people's lives. You've seen this being done in recent times, and in particular in 1929, it was a big major issue there. So they manipulate the global economy by increasing and decreasing the money supply and interest rates to secretly transfer wealth from the poor and the middle class to themselves via inflation, deflation, and devaluation. So this is a very, very well organized system. Unfortunately, when you watch the news, you are tempted to believe that these things are just kind of happening haphazardly and randomly. You'll hear that the central bank is hiking interest rates because of this, or they're lowering interest rates because of that, or they're doing a stimulus payment or a quantitative easing. All of these are by design. They're not random, they're not haphazard, they're by design because those who are pulling the levers, they understand human behavior, they understand economic certain actions in the economy. And one of the key things that they're doing is using inflation as a way to systematically devalue you by taking away a relatively small portion of your time and labor through the money you have earned on a day-to-day basis. So every day they're chipping away a small piece. And that's why you can't get ahead as much as you'd like to. As much as you're trying, you might take a few steps forward. It just feels like you're always fighting against some invisible force. That invisible force is actually inflation. And it is working day and night to rob you of your time and your energy, of your labor, of your freedom, of your productivity. Yeah. So gradually, they're making you poorer and poorer. Remember, I said earlier, it's the same thing that's done to slaves, right? What was done to a slave? They were captured, trapped in a system, and they were systematically robbed of their time, and they were systematically robbed of their energy. So inflation is a modern form of slavery, a very subtle, very sophisticated, very effective form of slavery. And if you don't understand it, you'll be a slave forever without ever knowing that you're a slave. Yeah. Now, there are ways to escape this slavery. You know, back in the days of slavery, right, slaves would always find a way to escape. Of course, some died in the process, but they're always looking for a way out. How do I escape from this slavery? Now, this kind of slavery is very massive, right? It's global. So it's not like you can just run from one country to the next. Fortunately, there are some countries who are better at managing the situation than others, and there are some countries that are poor at it. Jamaica is one of the relatively weak countries in that over the last, since 1990 to today, inflation has been about 300%. So it means that if you were working and trying to save money in the 1990s up to today, you'll be broke, right? Because your savings would be wiped out. The value of your money would be gone. So the only way for you to overcome this is if you were a skilled investor. Now, how many of us are skilled investors? How many of us have the time to study stocks and bonds, to analyze financial statements, and to, you're busy working so hard, your 9-to-5 job, killing yourself literally, trying to just, make ends meet. So a lot of people will never have the time or inclination to study in a way that will allow them to effectively fight against inflation. So here's a free lesson on how you can beat inflation. I'm going to talk about the macro level first, and then I'm going to go into the micro level, which is you personally. So nationally, what can we do? And then personally, what can you do, after that? So the Bank of Jamaica is the local equivalent of a central bank, and it is the representative of the global elites who worked through the two colonial parties to establish this arrangement in Jamaica to systematically rob the people of Jamaica via the central bank inflation scam. Cuba tried to do something different, but of course, the mistake Cuba made is that they tried to build a socialist communist country. If they had done what they did, which is to not buy into the IMF monetary system, like they didn't do, they didn't do that, and at the same time made their people free, they would have been the most prosperous nation in the Caribbean right now. But unfortunately, while they didn't pursue the IMF agenda, they systematically denied their people the freedom to be the entrepreneurs that they could have been and would have been. And so Cuba, isn't benefiting from having not followed the system. Now, let's discuss what inflation is and how it robs you of your wealth. Inflation is a decrease in the value of your hard-earned currency. Your government And I'm not just talking about the government in place right now, because any one of the two colonial parties you elect, they will follow the existing global monetary system. They will not do anything different. No matter which one you elect, they're committed to maintaining the system of slavery that you're now suffering from, called central bank, called inflation. So they're going to do it. The government has targeted, well, through the Bank of Jamaica, they set a target of 4 to 6% a year to steal from you. Can you imagine that? They have set a target that every year they're going to steal 4 to 6% of your earnings. So if you earn $100, they're going to steal a minimum of $4 to $6 of your $100 every single year. Now, that is an aggregated number. It's not really just 4 to 6%. They're just, flatlining it across the board. For the poor, it's much higher because the inflation is felt on most of the things they buy on a day-to-day basis, food, right? Basic food, transportation, especially the cost of gas and so on. So that's higher than 4 to 6%. So, but that's the target that they've set. So they're telling you that they have built a system that they're committed to stealing at least 4 to 6% of your earnings from you through inflation every single solitary year. Now remember, you're also paying taxes. So they're taking taxes from you directly, whether it's 15% GCT, NIS, NHT, education tax, and so on. They're taking that from you. And they're also going to steal from you using inflation. Yeah, inflation targeting. And if you are like most people, you borrow money, unfortunately for consumption in many cases, and then you're hit with, compounding interest charges. So your biggest enemy normally is inflation, taxation, and interest on debt, especially if the debt is bad debt. And most people have bad debt. Rich people borrow money to invest. Poor people borrow money to consume. And middle-class people borrow money to buy liabilities, which takes more money out of their pockets. So the fact is, if you don't know how to handle those three elements of your life, inflation, taxation, and interest, you're always going to be behind the 8 ball. So yeah, you can get distracted by all the hype of politics, get excited about which one is going to win, green, orange, 20,000 give back, whatever. Get excited about all of that all you want. But the bottom line is, while you're doing that, notice your prime minister. He's busy doing a lot of trades. He has a lot of bank accounts. He is investing here and there. So he is in government, and he finds the time to make sure that he pays attention to all forms of investment to make himself wealthy. So at the end of the day, all of these people who are following behind these two political parties, the majority of them are going to be poor. They're going to retire poor. They're going to be destitute. They're going to not have anything. But the politicians that they gave their time and energy to are busy using their time in office to enrich themselves, because they understand that it's a game in which you, the citizens, are going to lose. They're just distracting you right now and dividing you right now while they're busy padding, their bank accounts. And you'll find many politicians, they own restaurants, they own gas stations, they own grocery stores, all through politics, not by being, good entrepreneurs. They go in and they find ways to use the system to steal your tax dollars in different ways to enrich themselves, And so by the time they leave office, after you have spent all your time running up and down behind them, when they leave office, they're set because they have built a buffer between them and the inflation that they have brought upon you. So they have brought this inflation on you, they have dumped it on you, and you don't even know because you don't even understand what inflation is. So you're just trying to live your life and you're distracted by all the noise they're making, all the promises that they're making, all the hype that they're putting out there, all the excitement they're generating, but you're going to pay the ultimate price because every day you're losing money to the inflation that they are creating. So you experience this loss of your purchasing power in higher prices, over 300% now since 1990. There are two kinds of inflation that you need to understand, two kinds. And if you understand them, you'll be able to tell the difference from day to day, because there are inflation that happens outside of government. It's not the government's fault why some inflations happen. And but most of the time it's government's fault. Almost 90% of the time inflation is caused by government. And then there is, 10% or less caused by something else. So there are two types of inflation. One I call natural inflation, and the other one I call artificial inflation. So natural inflation occurs when, let's say, you have a storm or a hurricane or an earthquake or something outside of the control of the government that just hits. And what it does, it suddenly disrupts supply and demand. So whatever the thing is, let's say agricultural products, if you have a big storm, hurricane, and it wipes out the agricultural sector, then all of a sudden you have less agricultural produce available in the market, but the citizens still want to buy it. So the citizens are going to come to market and they want to buy the banana, they want to buy the yam, they want to buy the mangoes, but now it's not there. The market has less of these things because of this natural cause. The price of everything will go up because the demand is greater than the supply. So that's natural inflation. That's a part of life. That will happen from time to time. But then there's a more insidious form of inflation, a more dangerous form of inflation, one which is actually planned and orchestrated by the powers that be, from the global level right down to the local level in your country through your government. Yeah? So let's understand clearly what is happening here. Now, when you have artificial inflation, it means that the government's policy, the government's monetary policies is creating a mismatch in the supply and demand in the country. Example, the central bank may choose to flood the economy with debt-based currency, meaning they may give private banks the authority through policy to create more debt-based money out of thin air and push that money into the marketplace, which then inflates the price of goods and services, and not necessarily all goods and services at the same time. It may first start off in the housing sector. It may then move to, let's say, vehicles. It may gradually make its way into the rental market. It may push its way into the food market, So it all depends on how this money seeps out into the economy. So when you have new money coming into an economy that is not backed by productivity, or when the government borrows, for example, and spends into a low to no growth economy, what that is doing, it is robbing you of a portion of the money you have earned. Because what that extra money does, it dilutes whatever money already exists. So if you have $1 existing in the economy and you introduce one more dollar in the economy, you have now cut the previous dollar value by half, because you have now placed more money into the economy than the actual amount of goods or production in that economy. So the prices of any good or service will rise if supply decreases while demand rises, right? So as long as demand rises, or stays the same, and if you increase the supply, but the demand doesn't rise or stays the same, then you're going to increase the price for those goods and services. So for example, when you lock down an economy like recently happened, and you reduce production and you reduce supplies, while people still have needs, and maybe even give them a stimulus check, that stimulus is really a joke, because you're giving them a short-term soother, but long-term, which is what we are faced with subsequently, is the high prices that materializes from this mismatch between the supply of currency and the supply of goods and services. So if the country becomes, let's say, heavily import dependent, let me back up a second. Now, if government causes more money to enter the economy relative to the supply of goods and services produced by the citizens, prices will rise and the value of the currency will fall. You see that in Jamaica all the time. But let's look at the different avenues that monies come into the Jamaican economy, right? So if the country is, say, heavily dependent on, say, import, like Jamaica is, so then if you're an import-dependent economy because your government has failed to create a very productive environment, so for example, Jamaica suffers a lot from crime and violence, right? So crime and violence reduces business activities. Places close earlier, people refuse to invest, people hold back because they're afraid of what's going to happen. They're afraid of investing and losing their investment to criminals. So sometimes they just become consumers. They can't bother. So if you have an environment which is not conducive to productivity, people are not being highly productive. And that's happening in Jamaica all the time. So our productivity has been going down, and that's why you see the exchange rate goes the way it is, because your exchange rate is indicative of your production. If your exchange rate is always declining, it means your people, our output to the rest of the world, is declining. And you can see that in our import-export figures, right? So as long as we are an import nation more than an export nation, or we're not achieving a balance between import and export, what's going to happen is that you will import another country's inflation. So if you have inflation in the US, for example, or any other country that we're trading with heavily, if they're suffering from inflation by making bad monetary policy decisions, they will be able to just export that inflation to a nation like Jamaica's, which simply has to import because our government has not created a productive environment that would make us more prosperous. For example, suppose we were more effective at producing much of the food that we eat. Our farms were doing very, very well. We were producing high quality foods. Our people love what we produce. We don't need any foreign products. Our prices are competitive because we're doing it at a highly efficient and highly effective way. What would happen? Our import bill would go down when it comes on to food. If our import bill goes down and our output remains the same or greater in terms of, say, for example, tourism, and we bring those dollars in, the value of our dollar would rise, the prosperity level of our people would go up, and inflation would reduce in our economy because we would not be importing inflation from other countries. But unfortunately, we have lost track. We have become so focused on politics and the games and the bell and the power and the shower, and our school system is so weak and anemic that we don't have a clue what's going on. We just simply follow along and cheer along in the political process while our politicians are making us less and less productive, less and less competitive, and therefore inflating away our purchasing power each and every day, which makes us poorer and poorer. So right now, let's say you're nice and young and you're making a lot of money and things are going well for you and so on. Beautiful. What will happen to you in 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, when you become a senior citizen and realize that this was all a game and you are the loser because your government, be it orange or green, they have been following an inflation driven economy that is always wiping out your purchasing power. So by the time you eventually get to 50, 60, 70, now you're reaping the full negative consequences of having voted for these two parties for the last however many years. Right now it's 80. Keep it up another 20 years, that's 100 years. They will continue to inflate away the value. And remember, inflation steals your time and it steals your energy. It's just like slavery. In slavery, the slave master stole your time and he stole your energy. But he did it directly. He took a whip and he beat you and then work you hard in the field and you go home tired and you get little and nothing. You live in a squatter condition, you eat poor food, and you have poor health care and no education. That was chattel slavery. Now to modern day slavery, they don't physically beat you anymore. What they do is they write regulations, they write laws, they implement policies. Part of that policy is to make sure that when you leave school, you're not very bright when it comes on to money and economics. They don't want you to understand that. They want you to stay dunce when it comes on to that's why math is so hard. They make math very hard. So it's very hard for you to learn math and to understand math and then to move to accounting and to move to economics. So they keep us dunce. And their goal with that is to ensure that we don't challenge them on this. They just do this to us and we just suck it up. And we just keep working hard. And we work hard to buy the land that was ours in the first place. We work hard to build a house which is inflated away the price of material and everything. We work hard to put food on the table and it's getting harder and harder. It used to be you only needed one income, now you need two income, now you need three income. So you have to work harder and harder to keep up in their system. And they will never teach you this. You're never going to hear either of those two political parties coming to teach you this because they don't want you to know that you're stealing your time and your freedom. You're stealing your time and your energy. You're stealing the value of your labor. And it's working beautifully. So, as I said before, we're importing inflation is one of the things. Now, Jamaica has always suffered from inflation caused by government borrowing as well. That's another area. So when a government borrows more than we produce or more than our local productive capacity to fund corruption-induced deficits, that also drives up inflation. Let me try to explain this to you more clearly. So our economy in Jamaica is a very low productive economy. So we're not producing more than 1, 2, maybe 3% if we're lucky. But normally for years, it's been less than 1%, 2% annual growth rate in terms of our productivity. When the government goes out and borrows a few $1 billion and put this into the economy, all that does, remember, what are they borrowing for? They're borrowing that money, right? They're borrowing that money for what? Now, if they borrowed that money and that money was invested in something that increased your productivity, meaning, whoa, you were producing at 5,000 US dollars a year, which is horrible, by the way. But let's say you're producing, and that's where we are, between 5 to 8,000 generally. But let's say you're producing at 5,000 US dollars a year, and suddenly, because of the money they borrowed, your productivity doubled the following year to 10,000, and then doubled again the following year to 20,000, and then doubled again the following year to 40,000. Now that is good borrowing because the productivity or return on investment would be greater than the money is borrowed. So that's good borrowing. And that's what Singapore did, right? They really doubled their productivity rate overnight by investing properly. One of the areas they invested in Singapore, which was critical, which we borrowed money to do that as well, they invested in truly educating their people. So Singaporeans are brilliant. We're not talking about what we have here in Jamaica. We're talking about a situation where when you leave Singapore high school, you're bright. You're very, very bright. I mean, you know math and English and physics and chemistry and biology and computers and robotics. I mean, you're really bright. We're not talking about a system where you just learn to regurgitate some information. You can repeat Newton's laws of motion. You can tell what is the capital of this country or that. No. We're talking about where you really understand the depths of the subject and can apply that knowledge to solving real world problems. That's the kind of education I'm talking about. So Singapore, they invested in that kind of education so that when you leave basic school in Singapore, you're bright. When you leave primary school in Singapore, you're brighter. And when you leave high school in Singapore, you're very bright. And when you leave college or university, you're super bright, which is why almost every major company brings their companies to Singapore to take advantage of Singapore's highly educated population. So that's what they borrowed money and did. They invested in building top of the line human capital. Their citizens were extremely highly educated. You do that by equipping your schools properly. You do that by training your teachers effectively. And you do that by having proper systems of validating how well the students are doing, and you compensate your teachers commensurately by matching performance with income. So teachers who are doing very well see their incomes going up significantly, and teachers who are doing very poorly have to go find a different career. And you make teaching, you make education one of the most supreme jobs anyone would want to have in the country. So that's what I'm talking about, right? But our government, unfortunately, the Jamaican government, over the last 8 years, they borrowed all of this money, borrowed the money, and pump it in the economy. For example, let's say you borrow a few $1 billion and one politician steal, let's say, several million. What does he do with that several million that he steals? He imports a car or two. He sends his kids to foreign universities. He buys imported products and goods. And the same thing, those who they give the money to at the lower levels of their political parties, the people they buy out, to win the votes, the middle people who did the work for them to do this, the people who steal the money in the different agencies that they're working in and on different board. What do they do with these monies? All these monies just fund the consumption of imported goods. So this money is consumed, okay? It is, yes, it has been spent in the economy different ways. It has been spent on importing again, but it has not lifted the productivity of the people. All that has happened is that more and more people become adept at corruption. So the monies that we have borrowed have only served to build our capacity to steal. It has built our capacity to engage in corruption. So it hasn't built our productivity, it has built corruption. And it creates a demoralizing effect, which also builds crime and violence, because the criminals in the society, or the would-be criminals, sees the disparity, the income gap, and they understand that it is not by hard work and study and applying oneself in a knowledge-driven way, in a productive way that makes you wealthy in this economy. It is by corruption that you become wealthy, not by conscious, productive effort. And so you demoralize your students, you demoralize your teachers, you demoralize your society. So crime becomes far more attractive than pursuing academic studies and professional growth and development, because even the professional, the one who does that, goes to school, learns, and whatever, when he comes out, is almost just as worse off as those who didn't do any of that. Yeah, him can't buy much of anything more than them. He finds himself in a sweatshop or in a call center sitting beside somebody who didn't pass 5 A levels, did not go on to university, did not earn an undergraduate degree. And he's like, why am I doing this? Now, this is mostly impacting on men more than women. You know, men take these things to heart. So young boys, this cripples them mentally very quickly. And that's why they become as devilish and disruptive and destructive as they become. And they're easy prey for gang and gang leaders, and they're easy prey for politicians to recruit them to engage in negative things. And so that is a serious part of the problem. So again, that is now causing inflation, because when they borrow this money and inject it into the economy, what it does, remember, if you have $1 in an economy and you bring one more dollar in that wasn't earned, that wasn't a result of production, that does not result in production, then all that $1 more does is cut the other dollar in half. So let's say you earn the $1, you earn that $1 in the economy first. And then now the government comes and borrow one more dollar and brings it into the economy, and that $1 does not result in productive improvement. Then all it did is wipe out half of your dollar. So your dollar is worth 50% less because of that one more dollar that was brought into the economy. So you have just lost. And you may have very well gone and voted for that government. Whether you had voted for the orange or the green, both of them will do that to you. And they have been doing that to you. They have been doing that to us. Yeah. And so I'm trying to make sure you fully understand. And then I'm going to show you how you can protect yourself, how you can defend yourself, because we can't change government overnight. In fact, at the way things are going, we may never get rid of those two parties unless you decide to join me and rise up. So if that doesn't happen, you're still going to have to try to find a way to defend yourself. I have found a way to defend myself. I've been practicing self-defense in finance for a number of years now. And so I'll share some of my tips with you. But I want to share with you another way by which inflation comes in. Jamaica also suffers from inflation caused by importation dependency, as I said before, due to our low productivity and the added inflation thus imported from nations that are following similarly bad policies. Now, the way to avoid artificial inflation caused by borrowing is to not borrow from banks at interest and instead produce our own money as needed to fund public goods and services that actually increases our productivity to a degree greater than the new money created by a system of good governance. Let me unpack that for you, because I just said a mouthful there. Right now, your government is the most ridiculous thing on the planet, because here's what it does. Remember, the government by law has the power to produce all the money we use in our economy. The government has the power to produce every single dollar we use in the economy. Now, why has it chosen instead to borrow money from local banks at interest, when it could have simply printed the money it needed and pay for what it's going to pay for with the borrowed money, and we continue on with our lives? Instead, they don't do that. They give the power to private banks to produce money from a fractional reserve system, and then it borrows back that money from them at interest, spend this money into the economy, and then tax you and me, my friends on TikTok, my friends here on YouTube and Facebook and so on. they then tax you and me to pay back that interest. What do you think would have happened if the government did not borrow the money at interest, but instead printed that money itself, just so, and spend it into the economy and then tax us accordingly? What do you think would have happened? Well, for one, those banks would not have gotten billions of dollars in unearned interest. That's what they've gotten. So right now, your government has been making the banks in Jamaica very, very rich by paying them interest on unearned wealth. The bank didn't do anything to earn this money. They simply got a windfall, a free gift from our government, which allowed them to first produce the money and lend it to the government at interest. And then the government pays them back the principal and pays them back the interest by taxing you and me. If they didn't do that, but instead print the amount of money they needed in a responsible way and pay for things just the same way in the economy, then all that would have happened is that they would have saved us at least half the government's budget in interest over the last 60 years. We would have been much wealthier. We would have been taxed less. The government would have had no less money, but the banks would have been less richer. And the richer banks would have had less money to buy the political parties, to give them the money to buy our votes, to then make laws and regulations to serve their interest. That's all that has been happening all these years. Now, what I just said maybe flew over most of your heads because it's like, what is he talking about? Government printing its own money? Yes, why not? Who is it that tricked us into thinking that the way to manage a nation's money supply is to give that to private banking cartels and then force the government to borrow from those private banking cartels instead of the government following strict, proper rules of engagement, proper rules of monetary management to produce the amount of money we need in line with our productive capacity so that the two never falls out of line and therefore never create artificial inflation, and in the end result in us paying less taxes and getting no less than the quality output we're getting now from the government. Now that's another story, because truly we have been having taxation without representation. You see, in our government, we're not represented. Those who funded the two parties are represented. We simply authenticate them by going out and vote like fools. So we go and vote to give the appearance of a democracy, to give the appearance of an authentic government. And then they use that authenticity now to borrow money in our name and waste it and steal it or give it away. Yep. And every law and regulation they write are written and implemented to benefit their funders. The banks, the big banks and big corporate interests, PSOJ oligarchs, they're the ones who benefit from our government. So they have representation. We have none. We just pay the taxes for all of their mistakes. So here's the trick. If we understand what I just said, we would be able to rise up and overthrow them and say, my God, let's get back our country. Now, of course, it's hard for you to do that because, you're probably still have a question mark in your mind right now. Why must I really true? Because they've made sure that your education is such that, it's a struggle to fully appreciate what I'm saying instantaneously. Yeah. But the way to avoid this artificial inflation is what is this? I'm not sure. It says drag the puzzle piece here. Sorry, I'm just fixing something on TikTok here. All right, and good. That's good. All right. So the way to avoid artificial or government inflation caused by borrowing is not to borrow at interest and instead to produce our own money as needed to fund public goods and services that will actually increase our productivity to a greater degree than the money that we create to fund the system. And that's why you need good governance. If you don't have a proper system of governance, Giving a government this power will simply create Argentina or Zimbabwe in terms of what they did. But giving that to private banks simply makes them very rich and the people very poor in a systematic, structured way. So the difference between the private banking cartel and dumb politicians is that dumb politicians will just mash up the thing quickly, while the banking cartels are wiser and more strategic, and they will systematically mash up we the people. But they won't do it all at once. They will give us the booms and then the little bust. The bull markets, and then, yeah. So they're being very smart, and we need to start being smarter. The way to avoid artificial inflation caused by importation now is to export as much or more than we import by developing a solid competitive edge in some key areas. Now, Jamaica, we have some key areas that we can invest in that would make us very competitive and avoid artificial inflation that is caused by importation. The UIC has advocated these very, very clearly for some time now. The number one area is actually farming. We've just allowed the foreign masters to trick us and destroy our farming sector, but we can recover it. The land is still there, and we can, amend the soil and recreate what we have. Jamaica can become the organic food capital of the world, but we have to have a focused government that is not playing games anymore with the people, like really focused on harnessing all of our farmlands, stop building houses on farmlands, and put in place a solid organic farming infrastructure that will allow our farmers, and we can't just be willy-nilly. We're going to have to train our farmers, organize our farmers, put skilled people in place, scientists in place, engineers in place. So it's not now just careless farming or just ordinary farming. We're talking about careful, mechanized, organic farming that leverages permaculture technology, water harvesting, creating our own fertilizer, managing the environment, the atmosphere, really replicating what they've done in the Netherlands, but on a much grander scale in Jamaica, and make that our number one industry, producing the best quality food for our people and for export. If we do that, that's 500,000 jobs right there, full employment, not the fake one the Prime Minister is talking about. We're talking real high-paying job employment. You're talking about accountants, engineers, lawyers, doctors, nurses, scientists, technicians, agronomists, all kind of different roles you're talking about. In a very scientific way, we optimize our land, we optimize our water usage, we optimize pest control and so on, and make Jamaica the organic food capital of the world. That's one. You then want to couple this with a beautiful community tourism product. And what you're going to do with that is you're going to make all of Jamaica a tourist destination, not just some. So every community now becomes a tourist space. Every single house becomes a part of the tourism product, meaning even just to look at it. You might not go inside it, but the way it's dressed up, the landscape, the roads, the sidewalk, the street lights, the parks, the markets, the play areas, the community centers, all of that now, you stop degrading our people. You're going to start now to look at the Jamaican people as people to be valued, people to be respected, people that deserve to live a certain way, good way. And so now you're going to fix up all the communities. Every single one of them you're going to fix up. And you're going to allow the citizens to become the host from tourists around the world. Freely, they choose to. Whoever wants to do it, do it. But to make it easy and accessible for every family, every home to become a host. You have guidelines and teaching programs and whatever, and get our people fully engaged in the business of community tourism. Everybody now realize the value of this. You're going to triple and double your tourist intake right across the country. Good, beautiful gardens, parks, sidewalks everywhere in the country now. No more dirt, no more garbage. Everywhere is neat and clean and green. Vegetation's all over the place. Plant trees properly, fruit trees. You can just go pick a fruit. You know, nice ponds and fishing areas, beautiful spaces. There's no more room now for gangs and criminals because the country is so productive now. You don't need to engage in that anymore because there's so much opportunities now to make money for real. So remember, organic food capital. All of our farms now become tourist destinations. People want to come and visit our farms, taste our honey, our natural, sweet, organic honey, taste our fruits, the best fruits in the world, go through our farms and ride through the farms and see the whole thing, right? And just enjoy this new, vibrant Jamaica. The nightlife is good because now you have lights, you have pretty signs and stuff right across the country, street names, street signs. You can easily navigate the country now anywhere you want to go. The roads, we stopped doing the foolishness we're doing now. So our roads now, we're going to make sure that we use the best engineering for all of our roads now. No more foolishness. So a typical asphalted road should last between 13 to 18 years when done properly. So applying proper engineering to each of our roads and having a meticulous year-round maintenance program. So stop having patchwork. Instead, you're going to have a crew, designated crew in each of the parishes, each of the municipal areas that are going around daily, maintaining roads, no bumpy roads. They must be able to just cruise on side streets, main streets, highways, easily, cruising from end to end. So the tourist now, I mean, when he drops in Jamaica, the all-inclusive resort starts at the airport. So the moment he lands at the airport, it's all-inclusive already. He drives out, it's all-inclusive. And the citizens are experiencing this all-inclusive environment immediately. You understand? Immediately. There's no waiting for you to drive on some bad roads and go through some dark areas and whatever to finally get to this beautiful posh resort. Let the resort be all of Jamaica. The golf courses, the beautiful parks and play areas for the tourists and for us. My wife and I were in Singapore the other day, and we go to public spaces, tourists and citizens mingling alike. You could hardly tell them apart. It's such a beautiful, nice, clean, well-maintained area. No more dirt, dirty place. No more, old government buildings. Fix the place up. Make the place nice and clean right across the country. That's one way that we will eliminate the artificial inflation that is killing us. Another way is I have discovered that Jamaicans are very bright naturally. It's just our education system and the cultural norms that we have allowed to emerge over the years that is making us fully dunce. But if we reinvest in our people, like I discussed earlier on, in an education system that is really focused on making you bright, not just passing exam, not just regurgitating facts, but really mentally developed now of our people, we can now invest in the knowledge-based economy. Jamaica can be the international hub for outsourcing all kinds of work globally. If we get our people back to speaking English and making sure that they understand numeracy and effective communication, we can make Jamaica a knowledge-based economy. We can invest in our engineers and bring research and development right here to Jamaica from many companies around the world and start to reverse the brain drain cycle in our people. I can say more on this, but I'm going to stop here for now on this by just simply saying we can reverse the artificial inflation caused by importation if we do these things: organic farming, community tourism, and building a knowledge-based economy. Now, our government of the last 80 years failed to build an inflation-resilient economy by choosing instead to bind us to a fraudulent monetary system that undermines our economy and our lives. We, the people now, must embrace the UIC's good governance model in order to have a safe, clean, and productive society that brings out the best in our people. This will inspire local investment. This will eliminate the artificial inflation. This will raise our standard of living. And if we do that, we won't have to do the next part I'm talking about, because we'd have eliminated the triple threat of inflation, bad debt interest, and taxation without representation. But now let me turn attention quickly to how you can personally inflation-proof yourself and your family, because that's a key part of why we're here tonight. You want to see how can you escape inflation as an individual, and I want to make sure you leave here tonight with that understanding. If nothing else, you should be able to protect yourself from inflation. I see some notes here. Okay, I'm not sure what that is, but let's continue on this very important point here. How do you inflation-proof yourself as an individual? All right, here we go. On a personal level, the best way to deal with inflation is to buy assets that, number one, reduces your need for money. Think about it, right? Money is a big problem, right? Because it's fake money, it's fiat money. So suppose you buy assets that reduces, or invest in assets that reduces your need for money. What you're doing there, you're eliminating the effect of inflation, because you have eliminated the need for money. Now, that's a very, very wise approach, and I would strongly suggest we do it. And remember, this is an education session. It is not me giving you financial advice, because the government have implemented laws that makes it illegal for people like me to give you financial advice. They don't want you to get financial advice from people like me. They want you to get financial advice from people that will teach you what they want you to learn and not teach you what they don't want you to learn. They want you to learn to just follow the process and lose your value over time and to retire poor. That's what they want. They want you to follow a process where they milk you like a slave, steal your time, steal your energy, steal your value by diluting your currency and leaving you stranded in the end. That's why they want you to listen to their financial advisors. That's why they have taken away your freedom to choose how to even invest, because they want to lock you into their method. So remember, this is purely educational. I'm not giving you financial advice, but I think it's wise for you to invest in things that reduces your need for money. So for example, if you have some money, why not and you have space at your yard or your house, why not invest in water harvesting? Put in place a solid water harvesting system in your home that will allow you to capture rainwater and store it and filter it and use it safely, so that you never again have to depend on NWC. You can have them as your backup. So the National Water Commission, yes, the line will run to your house. Yes, the valve will be there to open it, to let it in, but you just lock the valve. So nothing is going through their meter. Everything is captured from your roof into a ground tank. If you're building your house, why not build a ground tank under your house or beside your house? Of course, following good engineering techniques, and have a ground tank in. Then put an air tank up. Build it into the concrete structure as well. Put it up, and then make sure you plumb your house properly so that it gravity feeds. So you can gravity feed throughout your entire house, get a good shower without turning on a pump or any electricity. You can have a solar pump, pump the water from your in-ground tank into your upper tank. And with that one thing, you can stop paying water bills for the rest of your life. That's money you don't have to earn. That's fiat money you don't have to earn. That's inflation you're protected against because you don't have to earn that money anymore. You invested once in your tank and in your system, and now you can run that system and avoid paying NWC for a long time. Yeah. Of course, yes, somebody is saying here, you had to first have that house. That's correct. I mean, if you don't have a house, you don't have a house. But if you have a house, that's one way you can do it, right? And next thing is, why not invest in growing your own food? So if you can grow 10%, 20%, 30%, 80%, 90%, or 100% of your food, then again, and you harvest your seeds, uh, do composting and produce your own fertilizer, learn about permaculture methods of pest control, you can produce enough food to reduce your food bill by a lot, 50, 60%, whatever. You can do that. So again, water and food. Next, invest in renewable energy. You can put a system in place that will pay back for itself in 3 years. And after that, for the next at least 7 years or so, you're going without a JPS. So again, you're cutting your energy bill and cutting the need for you to have money to do that. Yes, we're living in the tropics, as somebody's saying here, so you can do that. So 3 things, eh? You can invest in water harvesting, invest in food production, invest in solar energy, or even wind, depending on where you are, and other methods, as well. So make yourself water, food, and energy secure. That's what the UIC wants to do for all of Jamaica, but you can do that for yourself as a family. I'm not saying this is easy, by the way, or that it's free. Everything here still requires effort, but if you're going to be working very hard and slaving for somebody else for the rest of your life, why not just slave for yourself partially and put these things in place so that you can reduce your cost of living and your need for fiat currency, right? Next thing you can do to inflation-proof yourself is to invest in assets that generate income in line with inflation. What do I mean by this? Whatever investment you're going to do, try to understand whether that investment is a good edge against inflation or one that works in tandem with inflation so you're protected. So for example, if you're in certain kind of retail business or grocery business where you're selling stuff that people just have to buy, they can't do without it. For example, gas, you do gas business, people can hardly do without gas, So invest in the kind of business that is going to generate income in line with inflation. So as inflation goes up, your business is selling at a level on par with inflation because it automatically adjusts, So you're actually inflation proofing yourself with a business that works in tandem with inflation. So a grocery store. A third thing you might want to look at investing in is farmland, and or real estate, or rental housing, rental businesses, things that will appreciate in value as inflation goes up. So if you own certain types of assets, the asset is appreciating in tandem with inflation. That is going to inflation-proof you as well. Farmland is also good because one of the things it does is you can use that to do your water harvesting, you can use that to do your food production, you can use that to, if you have more space than others, to generate more electricity from solar and other means. And at the same time, the value of your land is appreciated because they're not making any more for the most part. So that will be a good edge against inflation over time, right? So these are some basic things you can do to inflation proof yourself. There are others, but now some people could even recommend you buy, for example, Bitcoin or other cryptos, because some of those, as risky as they are and problematic as they can be, gold. Some people buy gold as well as the edge against inflation. So these are all opportunities, but make sure you understand what you're doing. The greatest risk in investing is you, meaning the less you understand is the more of a risk you are to whatever you're doing, right? Okay. Now, never save in any currency. That's another way of inflation proofing yourself. Do not save in any fiat currency. Don't save in Jamaican dollars for sure. That's one of the worst fiat currencies to save in. So make sure that put your money to work in an investment such as stocks that pays a dividend and that has a return on investment that's greater than the rate of inflation. So whatever you're investing in, look at the rate of return on that investment relative to the inflation rate, and don't use the government inflation rate. Whatever they tell you, just double it to be on the safe side, right? Just double whatever they're reporting to you as a good metric, and then make sure your investment is returning more than inflation, and work through that. Now, one of the things that we have done in the UIC is to create the Community Capital Club. We designed this to help our members escape inflation by saving to invest and actively investing among themselves to keep their currencies actively circulating to earn more and more with compound interest and the applied knowledge that they receive in the club. So we're building in the UIC for our members. Every member is able to join the Community Capital Club, put regular amounts of money into the club. Each club manages their own pool of funds. The UIC as a body manages the overall pool to make sure that nothing untoward is happening, but the members make their own decision. These sessions that we have here empowers members to think, analyze, and make decisions as to how they want to invest their pool of funds and grow. So this is a very practical and pragmatic way in which persons can inflation-proof themselves by using the Community Capital Club. In summary, don't vote for any party or any politician that wants to keep the current system of banking and monetary policy in place. So one clear and easy way that you can tell if you want to vote for any politician, do they want to maintain the banking and monetary system that's in place? Once that is what they're doing, you voting for them is a vote against yourself, because they're facilitating the theft of your wealth. They're devaluing you as a person by devaluing your money. They're robbing you of your purchasing power, and you may not feel it immediately, but if you allow them to continue, and you, by voting for them, by the time you get to retirement age, you are going to be one very sad and sorrowful soul when you finally wake up and realize that all these years you have been voting for those who are committed to destroying you. Yeah. So insulate yourself against inflation by investing wisely. Invest wisely in income yielding and appreciating assets, including those that reduces your reliance on or any need for money. Choose businesses that are inflation proof by virtue of their nature. In short, well, in summary, or let me just say this. My father planted a mango tree about 50 years ago, or not 50, maybe about 40 years ago. And that mango tree is still feeding him right now. He can go out there and he can pick a Julie mango and eat. On my property here, we have planted several mango trees. They're now in their 11, 12, 13 years. We've planted over 200 coconut trees. We came here and saw some 70 ackee trees. And so, those long-term investments continue to provide us food, and you can do the same. Probably not on the same magnitude, but wherever you are, you can work within that context. Yes, somebody is saying, I want to hear our plans on controlling crime. I just laid it out to you. This is controlling crime. All the stuff that they're telling you, where they're like telling you all kinds of stuff and they're doing this and that. All they're doing is playing with you. Their crime fighting strategy is doing nothing more than playing with the whole issue of crime, and it will continue for another 50 years. I don't know how many of you are sensibly enough or mentally aware to realize that all that's going on now was going on 50 years ago. All the stuff you're seeing now was going on 50 years ago. We were waking up as kids hearing about 10, 15, 20 people shot, a police kill a boy down the road, a gang shoot up here. It's the same thing. They now come up with new statistics and measures to cover it. They try all kinds of ways to distract and divide us, but it's the same thing. If you have any confidence in these two parties, it means that you have not paid attention. You don't understand what's going on. You're either too young or too ignorant to realize that this is never going to change. As long as you're voting for these two parties, you're voting for another 80 years of what you've seen for the last 80. It's the same thing. So I want to leave you now because I have to go check on some other stuff. Please remember, we have our Christmas banquet coming up on December 14th. Please get your tickets now. Go to uicjamaica.com and buy your tickets for 65 USD or 10,000 Jamaican dollars and come on out. Craig McKenzie says, food business, yes, always work if you can manage properly. And Rockwell Madison here says, dollar cost averaging is also a great way to come. Perfect. Rockwell, I can tell that you have done some work in that area. So yes, that's good. And Magalian rather says, yes, sir, we could use a leader that teaches us that's what Jamaica needs right now more than ever. Not what those guys are selling as well, the bloggers, I guess, leading our people astray. And he says, you're absolutely right about the community tourism. I see Caribbean countries doing that right now. I watched a lady bragging about tourists walking through her community when the ships arrive. That's the way it should be. Angor says, remember to subscribe, like, and share. We need to get the message out there to as many people as possible. And Magallan says, who can't hear will just have to continue to feel. Crying sad, but real. Yes, that's so true. I mean, for me personally, I am committed to helping my country go forward, but I can only do so much. I'm one man. So my commitment is I will share with you, I will provide as much leadership as I can, and it's really up to the Jamaican people. Anybody who wants what we're talking about can help us make it happen. Otherwise, it won't happen. But look at the bright side. Tonight, you've learned some ways how you can escape inflation, how you can inflation-proof yourself. And I encourage you to think about them carefully and see what you can do for yourself and your family. So have yourselves a good night until we meet again next Friday, same time on UIC Liberty TV or One Jamaica TV. One Jamaica, stronger together. All the best, guys. Take care. And my friends here in